What measures has CMU undertaken to weather the current economic environment?
We instituted last school year, both a salary freeze for the current year, the one we're in right now, as well as a series of budget cuts that will be strung out over the next 3 years. Now, without making this longer than it needs to be, there's an important point to understand about university finances, this university and really every university. A portion of our annual operating budget comes from the long-term resources that we have, investments, endowment. This is true at every university. In Carnegie Mellon's case, about 5 or 6% of our annual operating budget comes from that source. The big impact of the economic downturn last year was on those resources. Our endowment lost about 26% during last year, the year that ended June 30th, 2009. And the thing that has to be kept in mind and can be confusing is the amount of money we use this year to run the university that we take from the endowment is based on the investment performance of the endowment in the 3 previous years, which means that last year's bad performance, losses, will have an impact this year, next year, and the year after. That's exactly why we instituted these budget cuts over the next this year and in the 2 years after. So one of the things that will be undoubtedly confusing to some people, particularly next year, will be as the economy recovers, and I believe it will have recovered by next year, we'll still be feeling the effects of last year's investment losses. Our endowment has done very well over the last few months, but the losses we incurred last year will be felt this year and beyond. So, having said all that, to put this in some context though, because we only get 5 or 6% of our annual operating budget from the endowment, the losses do not have a very big impact on the operating budget. Not a zero impact, and we've had to deal with it through cuts, but not the kind of impact it would have had the endowment represented a larger fraction of our budget. So we'll be okay. In fact, I think Carnegie Mellon will emerge from all this very strong.
Okay. Similar question. Even if the students don't feel the direct effects, do department cuts reduce the quality of education and services CMU can provide to its students?
The way we've implemented these cuts is to have them implemented and designed in the decentralized fashion that Carnegie Mellon does most things. So what I mean by that is each dean was asked, please find a way to reduce your operating expenses by 5% over the next 3 years, so that by the time we get to the 3rd year out, you will have been reduced by 5% compared to the current year. And in doing that, the first consideration is not to allow the quality of the educational programs you have to be reduced. Every dean is taking this to heart. And how it then plays out through each department, I couldn't even tell you how it manifests itself in every case. But I'm confident that the deans will have achieved that. Now we're just starting to see the effect of those cuts now and in future years. But I'm confident that our students will not see a reduction in quality.
How is this period and the steps that are being taken going to strengthen CMU now and in the future?
Well, even though we have been a very lean university, by that I mean our administration is not large, we don't spend a lot of money on it, we don't have gold-plated dormitories or recreational spaces for students, something I'm sure students would readily agree with, compared to a lot of universities. Even though that's the case, you can always find efficiencies. even in I think, a very efficient place like Carnegie Mellon. So one way in which we'll get better is we'll be more productive, as an economist would put it. In other words, we'll be able to, even if we just do 3 years from now what we're doing now, we'll be doing it spending less money. That's a good thing. That's efficient, and it frees up money to be used for in other ways. It can be a little bit distasteful to put this in sort of competitiveness terms, but often that's the way these things work. This downturn has hit many of our competitors much harder than it's hitting us, specifically because of this endowment dependence I talked about before. At 5 or 6% of our operating budget, that's the lowest by far among our peer group in terms of the amount we get from the endowment, which means that those other universities have had to make even bigger cuts. They're even less well positioned to take advantage of opportunities that might arise in new areas of research, new areas of teaching, in faculty hiring, in improving facilities than we are. So in a relative sense, the downturn favors us. We made it clear from the beginning, as the downturn became apparent and we realized we had to take steps, that in making cuts, we were not going to abandon the opportunity to move the university forward in key strategic ways. And when those opportunities arise, we would do everything we could to find a way to take advantage of them. And that's what we've done. So even though we slowed hiring last year, we didn't curtail it entirely. We continued to hire key faculty in strategic areas, and we'll continue to do that this year and next year and the year after. And I think that we're better positioned to do so because this downturn has hurt us relatively less.